Hey everyone, today we are starting the project on building the Simon game. This is the most complicated one we have encountered if you've been following the Free Code Camp curriculum in order. If we look at our user stories, there's a good amount to cover. So as usual, we'll be breaking it down piece by piece and tackling things, in small, distinct chunks of tasks, so to speak. Once you do that, it's always easy to kind of fill in the blanks once you have everything organized and you have a plan of action. So we have a lot of things going on here. We have, some sound clips that we're going to have to integrate. We're definitely going to want to have some glowing happening with these buttons, a whole lot of stuff. But the main idea is whenever I try to, start something, I always like starting with the functionality. So in this case, it's mostly the JavaScript. What is actually the game, and how does the user interact with it? So the story points we're kind of concerned with that in mind is we want to present a series of random button presses, and we want the next step to happen after we push the correct button. So that's the first plan of action. Let's just kind of jump right in. Might be a little easier as we begin typing as it usually is with coding. So the first thing I want to do is, we know that we have a Simon game, and if you've seen a Simon game, you know that it has 4 different buttons, and that's basically our interface. And what I mean by interface is that is what the user has to use to interact with the inner workings of the Simon engine. Just like how when I type, the letter I get the letter I on the screen. The keyboard is kind of my hardware interface for my computer. We need to build the Simon interface. So we're just going to start. I'm going to make a few divs, and I'm going to call the class Simon button, and then I'm going to give it an ID, and each ID will represent one of the colors. So we're just making little graphical divs that we'll see in a second that we'll be able to click on to start sending inputs to what eventually will be our JavaScript over here. So hopefully that's large enough. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead, copy paste this a few times. Yellow, actually the real order is blue, yellow, and green. Great, now we're going to add some CSS. If any of the HTML or the CSS, if this is going too fast, you might want to review some of the other front-end projects that is posted up here, which goes a little more into HTML and CSS. I'm going a little faster here because these concepts have already been covered in previous videos. So we want to start with, we want to select every div and just give it kind of a size. So we'll do Simon button. I'm going to just give it a height of 48 pixels and a width of 48 as well. So we just have some boxes. And what else did I have here? Cursor will be pointer. That will just kind of change our cursor from, just a arrow to the hyperlink pointer, so it looks a little more clickable because I like that. Now we just want to highlight each of the colors, so we'll start with red. Color red. And not color, we want background. As I mentioned in a previous video, which still gets me tripped up, color is the color of the text. Background is actually the color of the object. So as you can see, we have red here, and my cursor is also a pointer when I hover over it. We'll just quickly do the same thing for the rest. yellow background. Now the yellow background, if I just do the color, that's kind of bright and I don't like it, so it's a little noisy. So I'm just going to use goldenrod. All these colors are very, simple keyword colors. You can definitely use hex values if you like, but I am not a designer, so I'm fine with just basic colors, especially for now. Background, green. Okay, so we have our 4 colors here. That's great. So we basically have built the 4 plastic pieces of the Simon game, but of course there's no computer chip underneath it, so to speak. There's nothing these buttons actually do. They just look pretty, or pretty is a stretch with this color scheme, but you get the idea. So now what we want to start doing is we want to start making our JavaScript Simon class. And if you know about classes, I'm not actually going to use a class here, but we're designing it as if it is one, just for simplicity's sake. So what are some things we need for this Simon game? Well, the first thing we need is when one of these colors is pressed, we want that color to be registered. So for some initial setup, I am actually going to use a tiny bit of ES6. Const is the same thing as var, except that we cannot change what this variable is. So this is the only time I'll use ES6. The rest is going to be ES5, but const is a constant, and I'm going to basically make every variable of the colors equal to its corresponding string. The reason why I'm doing that is because we're going to be using these colors a lot, and I don't want to kind of make a typo somewhere in a string and have to go find it later. If it's all using the single variable pointing to the string, it just kind of helps prevent some errors. It's actually a very clean way of coding. When we use text editors and there's autocomplete, we will also be able to autocomplete these colors, and the text editor will help us ensure that we are using the variables that we have defined and not a typoed color or a color that doesn't exist. So I'll just do that real quick. Okay, great. Now we're going to have the actual Simon game, and it's going to be equal to an object. This object is going to have a bunch of different functions and inner workings of what this game is going to be. So it really is the computer chip inside what an actual Simon game would be. Now, the first thing we want to test to kind of make sure this is alive and well is we want to test that each of these buttons can be sent to the Simon game. So the first method I'm using on Simon, and the method is, this just means a function that is on the object. It's going to be called sendColor. So sendColor is a function that receives a color. And for now, I'm just going to console log the new color. I'll do a colon there too. New color, and the answer is color. Great. So, and just so you know, with this kind of syntax here, right, this is just an object, and the object has a key, sendColor, and its value is a function. So what we can do is we can basically say, type down here Simon.sendColor, and I believe we can just type red and not a string because we have that variable here. If I do that, you see that we have this log here, new color red. I can do sendColor yellow, and we get new color yellow. So I'm just accessing the function that's on this assignment object. If this setup is confusing here, you can do it a few different ways, right? We could actually set Simon to be an empty object. And then we can say Simon.sendColor equals, and we just take that away, function send the color. This right here just sets a property on the empty object, giving it the property send color mapped to the function, rather than just initially setting an object that has that property. I can run this here, and we get the same functionality. We can also do something like var send color equals the function. So technically, we have, right now we could actually it's just a global function, right? We can send the color that way. And then I could just say send color is send color versus the property, and then that's just pointing to this function up here. So now once again I can do Simon.sendColor yellow. Cool, that all works. So this way is just, it separates things a little more. If the nesting is a little too confusing right now, you can declare a bunch of functions beforehand. You can add the properties after making Simon an empty object. Any one of them works, and any one of them is fine. But I will be kind of adding everything inside here. Great, so now there is a method that's on Simon send color. We now need to have these buttons be able to invoke that function, passing in its own unique value. So one thing we can do, and will do, is use jQuery. Let's add that here in CodePad. You can always just add, where it is, quick add right here, and look for jQuery. Great, so now I have access to jQuery. Just as before, we want to put this all in a document ready listener. That way we can guarantee that these divs will be available when we put listeners on it. We're basically going to put some event listeners on each one of these divs, and on clicking, that will invoke the Simon function of getting, the next color. So let's do that, where we can start with selecting. Again, with jQuery selection, we select the same way we do CSS. So we will start with the ID red dot click function, and sometimes I like doing all this on one line if the function is short. So we will just then take the Simon object and send our color to it. And again, we have that variable, which is just right up there, that constant. So that should send the color red. Let me save that. Thank you. I usually have an account, but I'm just incognito right now. Alright, so we click red, we see here, new color red. Awesome, that works great. Now we just need to add this for the other four. Quick copy and paste to do that. And blue, yellow, green, red, blue, whoops, yellow, green. Alright, I don't need to save actually, it will auto update. So I click red, again we get red printed, click blue, we get blue printed, click yellow, we get yellow printed. click green, we get green printed. Great, so this is the very first step in our Simon game. It's a very simple object that just can receive a color and prints the color back. Now that this object can receive colors, it can start to keep track of when these colors are pressed and can start to remember sequences that it generates for us. So we're going to look at all of that, the actual game programming, in the next video. See you there.